Already hi, welcome to Blueprints. Instead of tea today, I have bagged water for us because I need to stay hydrated. You know, tea, I do love tea, but leaf water sometimes can constrict your little blood vessels, especially if it's caffeinated. So, you know, you gotta live right. Haven't been drinking enough water. My skin has been angry at me. I'm being a better husband to my gorgeous face. Okay, so I have an irreverent respect for Toni Cade Bambara. I have studied her before on my various social platforms. I did an amazing live in the top of 2024 titled I Start With the Recognition That We Are at War. That's about Toni Cade Bambara. We're also doing makeup, by the way. I read through conversations with Toni Cade Bambara as a holy text. It's something that I come back to repeatedly, like it stays on my person. People produce radical art because they are radical people. There's no such thing as radical art. There are radical people that make art. And the art that we make reflects our lives as artists. And this is something that I have always thought, but I have never known this to be more true, being an artist that takes my various crafts more and more seriously. Now, Toni Cade Bambara considered herself a community member first and foremost. She described herself in relationship to other people, mother, daughter, friend, community member, community writer. When she talks about her writing, she talks about how people would say, oh, you're a writer, can you help me write this? Oh, you're a writer, can you help me write that? I think that that's something that would get like clowned on social media these days, but that's really what she did. She was like, oh yeah, I of course I can help you write the petition. Of course I can help you write that demand letter. Of course I can. Because she described herself as a community member first. That's how she lived her life. You can tell how much she loves Black people because Blackness in so many iterations is so up close in her writing. You would almost think that she walks around like Randall from Recess, you know, with like a pencil in her back pocket, jotting on all the particulars that she witnesses walking around in her Black communities. But no, she actually speaks against that. She sees writers that pluck from their personal lives and just kind of place them in a novel to inscribing real people onto the page for profit, mind you, right? That's never just for fun. She calls them emotional gangsters, which baller. She valued the maintenance of privacy for Black people really highly, while also writing stories about Blackness that had truths in them, truths that she considered useful. Now, I remember going through a passage from conversations with Toni Cade Bambara last year on live, and that's one of my favorite lives to this date. It's been made available here at Blueprints for free because it is past that year threshold. By the way, when I say a year, I'm working in my year, right? We're working in 12-week years, so colloquially, things will be made free quarterly, just to make sure that people have access to, I don't know, the goodness. I don't really like to lock things behind a paywall. This is just to incentivize and reward people that choose to pay because I'll be doing dope shit with the money. But it isn't to say that like people that pay are inherently more special or get more or increased access to me because you choose to give me US dollars. And I certainly don't want to lock out the whole part of the colonized world that cannot afford to pay any amount of US dollars for a silly internet creator. That live is already free because, I mean, it happened a calendar year ago. But when I recorded that live, again, one of the greatest lives I've ever put on, shout out to Toni Cade Bambara for inspiring my best. I was sitting in a hotel room in Berlin, exhausted. I was mildly afraid because I was alone on this really odd side quest in the life of East Winter Gwendolyn. One day I'll tell you about it. But I was just like feeling the weight of being achingly and endlessly alone. I had one like small quip in that live relating to Toni Cade Bambara and how solitary she said the work of writing was, how solitary she found writing, and how much she had found sort of a refuge in film and in filmmaking because it required collaboration and you weren't just sitting alone in your room or in your house all day writing things down. She really talked about how much novels like take from you, how much the novel becomes your way of life. When she was writing These Bones Are Not My Child, edited by Toni Morrison, she was just like, you really got to wake up every day and sit in your chair and write for hours. And it is like, it's really lonely. Hold on, I need better light. It looks like it's dark out, but it's not. Now, the intimacy of people feeling me in the work as a writer always happens in retrospect. By the time you get it and feel intimately towards me, I've, gone on with my day or my life or my circumstance. But in the moment when I'm writing it down or when I'm going through the process of editing, I'm alone. I pour myself out in ink. I look up, it's 4 a.m. and I'm alone. And I am sitting there with like my abdomen open, my guts spilled out onto the page. I remember being completely struck with how well she manages to know me through time and through circumstance, this writer who departed the earth before I was born. It's less that I aspire to be like her and more that I think that we walk similar paths in our artistry through different loops of time. I want to call attention to this set of photos I published in November 2023. I made them with a favorite collaborator and longtime friend of mine, Erin. She captured these photos on film and then edited them for me, although she does have the unedited ones up on her Instagram. And also she like turned her whole apartment into a studio for me to be able to capture this particular moment in time. Let's zoom back, right? October, November of 2023 was some of the most mind-bending reality that I have experienced as an adult person. It was like the amount that the powers that be struck down their hand and twisted what was true was palpable. Man, I come back to Toni Cade Bambara's words all the time. I start with the recognition that we are at war, and war is not just some hot debate between the capitalist camp and the socialist camp. War is about what the truth is. I'm paraphrasing, but war is literally about what truth is, what we consider to be true about human nature, what we consider to be possible. Again, I'm paraphrasing here, but those are the words of Toni Cade Bambara as they strike me. They were never more true than in October and November of 2023, when the like every apparatus of the United States government and all of their soft and hard power just kind of tried to like men in black us and be like, this is not a genocide. You are not looking at a genocide. This is not a genocide. It is warranted destruction of an entire people, literally on the world stage, right? These people are live streaming their own deaths. It was, oh my God, it was surreal. And what was more surreal about that time, right? Because that was a state of mind and consciousness that went on for months. Like for the first like 6 or 8 months of the Palestinian bombardment, nobody really wanted to acknowledge that was the case. There was always, the Palestinians were always primed for death. It felt like the only right the Palestinians had were to die, which to die violently at the hands of the apartheid regime of Israel. What was wild about October, November of 2023 is that was still public sentiment for the most part. Like it was surreal walking around my neighborhood in Brooklyn, right? As a black person with my head covered, walking around in this like sparkly bedazzled hoodie, an unmistakable hoodie that I specifically bought for the purposes of being a walking advertisement that said Free Palestine. It was the unfriendliest morning walk of my life. And I'd be saying hi to my neighbors. They know me. It's not like this is my first time outside. It was the unfriendliest walk of my life. It was like public opinion was still very much that the good state of Israel was eradicating terrorists. It was also the first time that I had lost followers in mass on social media, which isn't something I inherently care about, not the numbers, but the reality that people attached to those numbers felt so strongly that saying Israel is an apartheid state was the wrong thing to say, such that they felt a need to block me. That was, it was a good understanding of where the public was mentally, especially because I had been, introduced to the concept of Zionism and to the fact that Israel is in fact an apartheid regime, that it isn't complicated, that they are in fact engaging in the same kinds of settler colonialism that all of the other great Western powers engaged in to be able to be what they are today. I was hip to that in college. Like that's when that's when that political framework found me, from going to school with Palestinians, from going to school with people that were Jewish that had gone on birthright and gone, actually, this is settler colonialism and I don't want anything to do with this. You can't be politically active in Chicago without coming across and taking up the plight of Palestinian people. Palestinians are super concentrated in the Chicago metropolitan area. So like, I think I had been in a bubble for quite some time as to how well these things were known and how well these things were adopted. I did not just lose follower counts in the hundreds, or actually I think it was in the thousands. I had restrictions placed on my account by Meta because I openly, like verbally stated Israel is an apartheid regime. And also all of you people that are giving me flack about whether or not it is an apartheid regime, I am clear we are on opposite sides. It took over a year to get full functionality on my account back. They limited how long the videos that I was allowed to post for over a calendar year after the fact. I was subject to increased surveillance, which they made obvious, right? The powers that be that run our distribution platforms don't need to lie about whether they're spying on me. They're openly spying on me. I mean, they're spying on all of us. We literally know, but it would take like 5 or 6 times to get a video uploaded. It would be under review for 12 hours, 24 hours, whatever, before it was allowed to circulate to the general populace to try and kill the video within the algorithm before it was released. I was realizing like, I had been explicit with my word choice. I didn't regret being explicit with my word choice at all. I think it was the right thing to do because people were being real wishy-washy with it. I probably wasn't going to say anything in particular. I didn't know that I needed to until there were a bunch of people that were like, Ismail, what's your opinion on Palestine? What was obvious to me was not apparently obvious to everybody, and I found that out over time. Now, the other part of that was I could not continue to be explicit with my words without just getting my account fully taken away. So I had to start considering, okay, how do I be as explicit as possible while not using so many words that can be easily censored by like the artificial intelligence systems that they use to, you know, scan through your videos, scan through your transcripts, scan through your captions, and just like, you know, flag certain words. They do that on TikTok all the time too. I know that Meta takes a lot of flack for being particularly censored, but TikTok is also particularly censored. They are not a better or more moral social media. They're just less likely to censor things that make the United States look bad, but only to a certain extent. If I uploaded certain kinds of rhetoric, that rhetoric would be glitched, or the captions wouldn't upload on that particular part of the video. So I know that I'm being watched, right? It's explicit. So I remember thinking, okay, how do I go about making sure that I am explicit without just like getting my accounts taken down overall? Not that this is a bad thing to go down on, but that like the ideal situation is that I can continue to do this work, but I don't necessarily have to be covert. So I organized this shoot with Aaron. I made it poetic so that all of the words there didn't have to say anything like Free Palestine, such that the art present told you exactly the situation and the political stance of the author of the work, of the model of the work, of the photographer of the work, etc. Now, in truth, I have dreamed of having a magazine since I turned like 24 or so. I remember asking myself, like, okay, so if I was to be on the cover of a magazine and have an accompanying editorial, not saying I am, but if I was, what would be in it? And thus the first DEWY was born. I posted it on Instagram for my 24th birthday to consider where I was at that point in time, to archive myself in a way that was like really beautiful. And I received lots of like positive attention. Again, Instagram at that point was just for family and friends. I didn't have an Instagram following, even though I had bloomed on TikTok by that point. Yet like Instagram had not caught up yet. They're very different platforms, honestly. I did that for a while. I made like, I thought I was going to turn my Instagram into kind of like a visual newsletter to let people know how I was doing and what I was working on. But I got bored of that really quickly because I don't like gratuitous updates. Like I don't feel the need to talk about my life for the sake of talking about my life. And while I did want to stay consistent in art making, especially at that point in time, because I had just entered into what would be a rather long period of houselessness, or I'm not having a primary residence, I still didn't like it. Like it's very, it's the way that we engage in celebrity, gratuitous updates for the sake of it, or gratuitous updates for the sake of staying relevant, quote unquote, you know what I mean? I stopped, but I was still thinking about like, what would it be like to have a magazine that replaces this gap where we once had legacy media that worked really hard to be able to give artists that are otherwise not given platforms within legacy media a space to be able to reflect on the art that they made and why they made the artistic decisions that they did and what went into it and the challenges that they faced and how they've grown. Hydrate. Black media used to do that, right? We had Jet and Ebony magazine. We had Negro World by Marcus Garvey. We had different kinds of media outlets that allowed Black artists. I mean, they did a multitude of things, right? Current events that talked about the colonized world, the Black world in a particular way. But we also had artists being able to expand within these platforms and be and journalism with integrity that's so to tell these stories in a way where that we could understand, that translated these people in ways that were not just sensational or to sell magazines or to sell clicks and likes and engagement like we have right now with the podcast sphere kind of filling in that gap that we have between legacy media and people that are culture makers. I was like, what if we had something like that? I mean, I had been ideating, but I kind of just like put it on the back burner because again, you know, homeless. So when the bombardment began again in the Gaza Strip, this is just a note, I always say bombardment instead of genocide because the conditions of genocide were present in Palestine before they started carpet bombing women and children and men and civilians and hospitals, etc. Right? Before they decided like a systematic extermination attempt, the conditions of genocide were already made. I mean, kids were still being shot by snipers, right? Like there wasn't free movement allowed. People were still starving in their own homelands because the apartheid state controlled the movement of all sorts of goods and services. It was an apartheid state when the Israeli government was established by Western power. Apartheid necessitates genocide. It's just a slower occurring. It's one that unfolds slower than outright extermination attempts. But in any case, the bombardment started, I wanted to be explicit without getting my account just completely taken away. And so I turned to visual art. And this was the rebirth of DEWY, rather than it just being about what I was doing or how I was navigating life or whatnot, which feels very celebratic, right? Celebrity-esque in its intent of like, oh, I'm interesting enough to do, and I want you to look at me just like living life for the sake of it, very gratuitous. It was about the production of art and had an explicitly political, not even just a lens, explicitly political outcomes. I spoke about the existence of DEWY really briefly. Do I want my eyeliner today? It's giving one or the other. It's either an eyeliner or a mascara day, and I don't know which I'm gonna choose. Okay, I'm trying to get better at talking and doing my eyeliner at the same time, a la Bailey Sarian, because she be doing crazy eyeliner and also talking, and I'm like, the witchcraft, how do you do that? I did talk about DEWY briefly before I started talking about the 12-week year, because it required that I review 2024 well. And one thing that I did say that I was proud of was the level of production that I put in on DEWY. And that's been really silent work. Like, obviously this is the first you're hearing about it in long form because I wanted it to be a surprise. We've just gotten close enough to like the launch of things such that I feel comfortable letting you know that it exists. But I've been shooting for DEWY for the last calendar year, like all throughout 2024. I was shooting and I was experiencing, you know, like trial and error for the first time in a long time. I went to school for writing, you know. I have one of my degrees is in creative writing. Okay, period. Haha. I was a dual major in undergrad in global public health and in creative writing. So like I don't experience a ton of trial and error when it comes to creating writing that I enjoy, especially because writing is solitary work. I trust in myself, I trust in my pen, and I have a really clear understanding of my voice, my writing style, and what I seek to accomplish within the work that I produce in the long form written word. However, media production in terms of visual still art is new to me. And it's not just the fact that I'm returning to modeling after being out of that space for, you know, like 10 years basically. I'm also now creative producing. Models are not supposed to speak. You're not supposed to have opinions about what you look like or what you wear, what your makeup is, or what the statement is. You're supposed to show up and be a canvas for someone else to paint on. So the fact that I am both the canvas and the painter, this is new territory. And it's also requiring me to be the boss. Like, I have to say, no, I don't like something, which is difficult when you're talking to artists. You know, artists are very sensitive about our shit. I have to say, when we got to do something again, I have to pull cuts. I have to ideate like what goes where and in what time frame and who do I want to be able to tell the story, because I'm putting my own self through self-funded, self-designed editorials. And this is a stretch on my imagination, but it is also so pleasant to collaborate. It also does a different thing, right, than writing does. Writing is solitary work where I'm expressing my ideas as clearly as possible to get people to chew on something. And that has a different function than creating art, that it has a way lower barrier to entry, right? We're talking about Instagram and Instagram stills. So I don't require a ton of your time, or I don't, stretch your attention span. You're just looking at a picture or a carousel of pictures, which means that in 5 seconds, the picture can imprint upon you in a way that you cannot spend 5 seconds, a literal 5 seconds on an essay and be impacted in that same way. As Bambara said, to paraphrase, but as Bambara said, literacy does have its potency. I just don't think it's the primary source of liberation. Literacy it packs a punch, right? And it does show itself in how relevant long form media can proliferate into the greater cultural scheme. I don't think it's the primary means of liberation. Reading comes with that really high barrier to entry, as we talked about last week. There are people that have a stress response with reading. They get invited to read something and they click off, they switch, click, done. We're not listening anymore, right? And all long form media requires a certain amount of trust between the audience and the art maker, that the art will be worth the time and the attention that you invest, right? To be able to understand or to be able to engage with it. And Instagram, especially still pictures on Instagram, which is a lost art, they're really fumbling the bag of being the silent app. Y'all should have acquired Canva. I digress. That's why I've migrated to Pinterest. But either way, we art makers need to have the ability to imprint ourselves within the minds of the masses without asking too much on their attention spans, which are waning in the social media age. Basically, the vehicles of dissemination that I am working under are determining my function as an artist. So basically, this is propaganda, right? Like this is propaganda. I have been making propaganda art, which in its creation and its implementation seeks to accomplish a political goal. It's just propaganda for things that I find useful, those useful truths for those of us in the globalized working class. I start with the recognition that we are at war. I'll read the whole thing here. I start with the recognition that we are at war, and that war is not simply a hot debate between the capitalist camp and the socialist camp on which economic, political, and social arrangement will have hegemony in the world. It's not just the battle over turf and who has the right to utilize resources for whomever's benefit. The war is also being fought over the truth. What is true about human nature, about human potential? My responsibility to myself, my neighbors, my family, and the human family is to try to tell the truth. And that ain't easy. These collaborations between photographers, writers, journalists, other kinds of visual artists that I've been working with, it's really taken me out of the solitude of writing. And the world of visual art and production has so many moving parts to it. It has to pass through so many hands to come into existence. Well, I do like that. I'm finding. I like that. I'm an introvert. I thrive on alone time, okay? And I also don't plan on hanging up my pen anytime soon. I'm still a writer, so I do still need significant amounts of alone time to be able to make the art that I want to make at the level of excellence that I require. And I find myself being more and more interested in filmmaking. Again, right, films have a lower barrier to entry than reading or writing alone. And I think of Toni Cade Bambara, who made that same jump, because like, I ultimately want to do what's effective, and I want to stretch myself. I pray to her and I hope she hears me. I'm just down here bumbling along the same path. Yeah, all right, so you'll be seeing a lot more of DEWY. I'm really excited. Warmest regards. I hope the work of your day passes through your hands with ease. Or better said, peace.